I think maybe all of you, except perhaps Phoenix, know that I spent more than 3 decades as a teacher before I became a minister. And sometimes I pull my teacher hat back out, put it on my head, and share with you what may sound more like a lesson than a sermon. However, the older I get, I don't necessarily see the divisions between teaching and preaching. Some teachers have shifted my soul and spirit with what I have learned from their lessons more than what I've heard from some preachers' pulpits. I've even heard folks say that they didn't come to UU churches because they thought we were too academic. We weren't spiritual enough. I think I know what they mean. Yet for some of us, our most spiritual highs have come from learning, reasoning, discovering new knowledge and insights, especially with others. So yes, this message shares more knowledge than poetry, but hopefully we will still provide you with some spiritual nourishment. The title is A Brief History of Book Banning and Burning. And I chose for the opening slide, the book cover of this message, if you will, a picture from one of the most famous book burnings in history, that of the Nazi burnings, primarily done in 1933. This picture reminded me of a book that I read. Here it is. A book that I read. It's probably banned in many school systems, I would think, which was made into a movie called The Book Thief. Did you read it or see it? Some of you did. Well, I'm going to show you a clip though, to remind those of you that did, and for the others of you to see. This is the main character, Liesel, and she's participating in one of those student-sponsored book burnings, and then she steals one of the books from the still burning ashes.
Your shortcuts. Leave them alone. Like the speech. Don't cough. Were you listening? What about it? Your mother was one, wasn't she? A communist. That's what they say. Who's they? You even look like one. What are you talking about? I'm not talking to you, Steiner. She knows. Burn the book. Don't burn the book. Go on. I'll be watching. Both of you. What's that about? Nothing.
Now, the book bans and burning in Nazi Germany were conducted for the same reason that we see books banned now: to control culture, to control the narrative, to synchronize the culture with an ideology that is usually lifted up by nationalists or fascists, or those who are dictators or dictator wannabes. During this time period, especially in 1933, a series of massive bonfires took place in Nazi Germany, which burned thousands of books written by Jewish authors, communists, and others. This included works by Einstein, Freud, Helen Keller, Lenin, Thomas Mann, Marx, Upton Sinclair, Leon Trotsky, and many more. Of course, this kind of activity didn't start with Hitler, did it? Efforts to get rid of writings began with the very advent of writing itself. You all have heard me share here how the Emperor Constantine forced the bishops to adopt the Creed in Nicaea, then burn any writings that were contrary, and to excommunicate, banish, or even kill those who did not fall in line. This is from a fresco at the Basilica on St. Nicholas of the Council on Nicaea. I'm going to share with you though some information that goes way back before Constantine, way back. Now, most of the information I'm going to share comes from either from Wikipedia or a great comprehensive source that I found called thisbookisbanned.com. All one word, thisbookisbanned.com. It's really good. It does, you think that, okay, that's going to be nothing, but it's a really good source. And I've got another source I'll tell you about later. And the pictures that I pulled come from a variety of sources. I'm going to go through this rather quickly because of our time, but you can look up this website and the other one and read more later. So here we go. Brief history, okay? You think, why should they such this out? Well, this is, I have a lot out, but here comes some, these are some examples, folks, just examples. From 259 to 210 BC, the Emperor Chincha Huangdi is said to have buried 460 Confucian scholars alive in order to control how history was written in his time. In 212, he burned all the books in his kingdom, keeping a single copy in his royal library, and even those were destroyed before his death. Since all historical records were destroyed and eradicated, he was saying history began with him. It began with him. So, in the year 35, the Roman Emperor Caligula banned the reading of Homer's The Odyssey. It was written more than 300 years earlier, but Caligula considered the epic poem dangerous because it expressed Greek ideas of freedom. Now that. And then in about 640, according to legend, the Caliph Omar, Muhammad's father-in-law, burned every volume in the library in Alexandria in Egypt. There were over 200,000 of them. On the upside, burning of all these books provided 6 months' fuel to warm the city's baths. That's the positive, okay? Now, Savonarola, this fellow right here, he was a bad dude. He was this powerful Florentine religious fanatic that gathered a large following. He was also one of the most notorious censors of all time. During the years 1497 and 1498, he incited the great bonfires of the vanities, which burned books and paintings by some of the most renowned artists in Florence. He was persuaded the artists themselves to come and throw their paintings onto the bonfires. And a number of poets became convinced that their lines were wicked and impure. So they decided to stop writing in verse, Sheila. No poetry allowed here. She was a great poet, so I'd say that. Hers are great. But, you know, stop writing. The final bonfire, though, was lit in 1498. Only this time, this is it, this time it was under Savonarola, and he hung from a cross. And ironically, all his sermons, essays, and other writings were burned with him. So sometimes there could be payback for powerful, evil people. Occasionally, I don't go along with that payback. I'm not saying, but I'm saying sometimes it happens. In 1525, 6,000 copies of William Tyndale's English translation of the New Testament, which had been printed in Germany and smuggled into England, were burned by the English church. Church authorities at that time mandated that the Bible, of course, only be available in Latin. Now, the Roman Catholic Church had been listing books prohibited to its members for hundreds of years, but in the year 1559, Pope Paul IV established the, let me see if I can say this, Indices Librorum Prohibitorum. Pretty good. But there you go. And for more than 400 years, this remained the definitive list of books. There was a big long list of books they kept adding to that Roman Catholics were prohibited from reading. It was clearly one of the most powerful censorship tools in the world. In 1514, James I banned Sir Walter Raleigh's book, The History of the World, Raleigh wrote the book while in prison in the London Tower by James I. And surprisingly, it was banned for being too saucy and censuring princes. He was doing a little of that. Now, I happen to know that Sir Walter Raleigh was a frequent visitor to the Tower back in Elizabeth's reign, depending on whether he was on her good side or a bad side, and he went back and forth. So, but in this case, that's supposed to be his child with him there too, as he writes the history of the world. And then in 1633, the Catholic Church banned Galileo's dialogue concerning the two chief world systems. This is the book that championed Copernicus' model of the universe, which put the sun at the center of the universe rather than the earth. Galileo was not only forced to renounce his belief in the Copernican model, he was placed under house arrest for the rest of his life. Thomas Morton's New English Canaan is considered the first book to be banned in the United States in 1644. Well, technically, it would be what would become the US. So, Thomas Morton arrived in Massachusetts with the Pilgrims. Now, they're our spiritual ancestors, right? Puritans, the pure Pilgrims for the Unitarians. You might claim this one, though. He came with the Pilgrims. He wasn't on board, though, with their strict, insular Puritan society they built out. And in the book, New English Canaan, it's a harsh, satirical critique of the Puritan social order in general. And also, he discusses the contemptible treatment they had of this new world and of the indigenous inhabitants in it. So he was very, very critical. He is sometimes called the pagan pilgrim for his love of rites like the Maypole dance. So that's why I said maybe we'll claim him. Morton was arrested for the publication of New English Canaan, and he was exiled to Maine. But now you have to remember that might have been that time. That might have been a pretty big exile, I guess. Exiled to Maine, and he died in 1647. Many historians point to Harriet Beecher Stowe's anti-slavery novel, Uncle Tom's Cabin, as the first book in the United States to be banned on a national scale. But the nation that it was banned on that scale was the Southern Confederacy. Even so, the banning in Southern states began years before it was published, before they seceded. But the instant this book was published in 1852, Uncle Tom's Cabin outraged people in the South, who labeled it slanderous to a criminal degree. Though it was a bestseller in the North, right? Bestseller in Northern states. Actually, when Stowe met President Lincoln, he is quoted as having said, "So you're the little lady who wrote the book that made this great war." Right. And of course, in 1859, Charles Darwin's Origin of the Species, which introduced the theory of evolution, was published. In that same year, the book was banned from the library at Trinity College, which was at Cambridge, which was the very school where Darwin had been a student. Origin of the Species, of course, was also at the heart of the 1925 American legal case, commonly referred to as the Scopes monkey trial. That's another one of those courtroom dramas that Greg loves.
Inherit the Wind.
Watch over and over again. Well, you can see this could go on and on and on, but I can't. So this next slide is just a few of the other books banned in the 19th and 20th centuries for a variety of reasons in lots of places. You may have read and appreciated all of these. I especially want to note that Hemingway himself said that American literature actually began with Huckleberry Finn, which was viewed as too crude initially in Boston, but still today in many still systems for similar reasons and others. And then you see almost all of Hemingway's books were banned in various places in Europe and the United States. And these are some of the best books I've ever read, except I did not like The Old Man and the Sea. Must be something wrong with me. So books have been banned and burned from the beginning, but something is now occurring that reminds me of times like the bonfires of the bandits. And a huge number of books and writings are being lifted up as being profane and immoral. And the truth is, they just don't match the ideologies of the folks who are complaining. Like those olden times, those who promote these bans are afraid these books might make people think differently. Consider alternatives. Break out of the shackles that chain them to a narrow view of the world. And these bans have been especially targeted at books that may be read by children, teens, and young adults. Here's a slide that shows a whole bunch of books that you may be familiar with that have shown up on these lists. Florida's Don't Say Gay bill that was passed in 2022 has Florida schools removing significant numbers of books from their libraries. And then there's also their same state Stop Woke Act, which is officially the Individual Freedom Act. PEN America, which is the other site I'm going to tell you to go to get a lot of good information. PEN America. PEN America describes this as an educational gag order. The law has Florida teachers removing or covering all the books in their classroom libraries until they have been vetted by the proper authorities. Hundreds of books were ultimately removed after they were objected to by a single person. In fact, in the 21-22 school year, 565 books were banned in Florida schools. Some were banned permanently, though others were banned temporary pending investigation. Either way, the result is the same. The students have lost access in these schools to these books. Here's a meme I took from Facebook that I like. With many of the books that were banned in Florida and that have made a difference in my life. You know, so live your life so that if we're turning the book Florida was banned, I think that's a good way you should live your life. Yeah. I like that. Now, you may think that's just crazy Florida and their leadership. But no, these same laws, similar laws, have been copycatted throughout the United States. Of course, that's what they do always anyway. This think tank comes up with all these and spreads all the laws to all the states. And so you see the same similar ones over and over again. From July 21 to June 22, PEN America found 2,532 instances, that's just 1 year, of individual books being banned, affecting 1,648 unique book titles. The bans occurred in 32 states. So this is not just a southern thing. Well, some things going on an hour right now with these book bans. The bans occurred in 32 states, with Texas and Florida leading the nation. That's according to this PEN America's landmark 2022 banned in the USA report. Now I'm going to just read through. I don't know if I have pictures of all these, but I'm going to read through some of the ones that are on these lists that you may have heard of or read. To Kill a Mockingbird, Chief Seattle's Brother, Eagle, Sister Sky, The Kite Room, Forever by Judy Blume. Now, actually, Judy Blume has had several banned books through the years, including the one they recently made in the movie, Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. She says every time a book was banned, her sales went up, you know, and that does happen a lot. The Giver, Fry Bread, a Native American family story, The Handmaid's Tale, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, Harry Potter, all of them, all of Harry Potter. Little bit too occult, they say. The Perks of Being a Wallflower, Henry Aaron's Dream, Bridge to Terabithia, Of Mice and Men, The Color Purple, A Wrinkle in Time, which I read as a young child and just love. Again, seems a little too occult, you know. A great book. The Bernstein Bears. Black Frontiers, A History of African Americans is banned in many places. Coates's book, Between the World and Me, The Life of Rosa Parks, Pride, The History of Our Remembrance, Actually, I cannot list all of them, but any book that has anything to do with LGBTQ topics is on the list.
Mhm.
Also, who is the Dalai Lama? And others in this who is series, if they don't fit right within what some groups think should be the people we are learning about. Stamped from the beginning. The Hate You Give. Toni Morrison's Beloved.
Mhm.
Brave New World. The Absolute True Diary of a Part-Time Indian. And Tango Makes Three, which we saw this morning. A Raised in the Sun. Their eyes were watching God. Beverly Tatum's Can We Talk About Race? The New Jim Crow. The Story of Ruby Bridges. I Am Enough. And our own he's a Barnwell story and song, No Mirrors in My Nana's House, was banned for some reason from the York School District in Pennsylvania. Well, let's bring it on home, though. 2 Georgia laws that were passed went into effect in 2023. These laws in Georgia have been so vague in what can and cannot be taught. It comes down again to one parent being able to object and perhaps causing some books or curriculum to be banned.
Mhm.
Like in Florida, it's sort of an educational gag order. I wanted to find out how this might be working here. So I emailed one of the media specialists I know that works in our system and told her I was working on this sermon series. I asked her if she could still use her own professional judgment in these situations to decide which books to order or to leave on the shelves if a complaint is made. Since these, what had happened differently since these Georgia laws were passed? She wrote me right back and she said, I think that is a question that should be directed to someone at the Board of Education office. Actually, I was able to find out from the internet. If a complaint is made under these new laws, the decision has been removed from our professional librarians and teachers and put into the hands of the school's principals, who may be more easily pressured by parents. So yes, I believe teachers and media specialists are afraid.
Mhm.
They're afraid to teach or have on their bookshelves anything that might be seen as controversial to these right-wing, anti-woke parents. And indeed, the Cobb County teacher was just fired August 18th for reading the book, My Shadow is Purple. She read it last year to her 5th grade class. Now, My Shadow is Purple is by Scott Stewart. It's a lovely book for children about being true to themselves. So this is a great book for letting non-binary children know they're not alone, and for helping others to be more accepting. The superintendent and board members voting for her to be fired, and it was along party lines, by the way, said she should have known better. Should have known better. The teacher contended that the law is not specific enough for her to know what is appropriate to read. But she's fired. The message to other teachers and educators is beware.
Mhm.
And I know some of you are up in higher ed where these things don't occur.
Yeah.
But I think we all better beware. Okay. So, how do we change the hearts and minds of folks? It's very difficult when one of the best ways folks to begin to think differently and to embrace others who may be different is to read about characters and people who are different. Of course, we can make our voices heard. We can vote in every election for folks who want their children to think critically and learn about others who may be different. But that may take a while. Sometimes you just have to start with something little, just something little to begin with. And that is indeed what your board has agreed for us to do. We are putting up a free little library of banned books and making those available to the community. We will put it on our property where folks can easily access it and attempt to keep it full of books. So you all start looking on your shelves at home to see if you might have some that you can contribute, maybe get a box for folks to go in, we'll keep it full of books. May have to put a camera there too, wait a minute. Okay. All right.
So we can see who takes.
Long ago in the early nineties, when I was speaking, this is me, that's how I looked back then. When I was speaking out at the Bullitt County Board of Education meeting as an advocate for African American students who were tracked from kindergarten into low achievement groups that essentially resegregated the schools at that time. One of my former classmates from elementary and high school came up to me and said, "Jane, you were raised right here in Statesboro with the rest of us and taught the same things we were taught. What in the world happened to you?" And I said, "Well, I read. And that's the truth. May that still be a possibility for everyone in the future." Amen.
Amen.